you ever follow any YouTube? Like, is YouTube like a platform you use a lot, or do you use more Spotify when you listen to things?
No, I listen to YouTube, pretty much just YouTube. That's like my platform. I just because I pay for like the premium, so I try to be like, consolidate my expenses.
Get away from the ads.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be like, even like I have the Netflix. I pay for the Netflix. I don't really use it that much, but I'm like super money conscious, and I hate, like, first off, like Netflix, like they've been a little I think like not doing the right things, and that goes back to what we said earlier. Like, if they're doing things that I don't like, I'm just not gonna pay for their thing anymore. I'm just gonna pay to go somewhere else.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a good place to start jumping into the podcast here. Well, before we jump in, you want to introduce yourself to the audience for people that don't know you?
All right. Yep. My name is William Masteller. I was born in New York, Queens, New York. I moved to Berwick when I was about 11, so that's a little while ago, about 10 years ago. And the current things I'm involved in, I'm involved in boxing. My career choices, put me into truck driving. Things that I do on the side, I kind of live a solitary life. I like to read, meditate, touch and contact with my beliefs, which, I do believe in a higher power, and I refer to that, as God. Other people might refer to it as other things. And, that's kind of my lifestyle. I try to do the right things and kind of see where life takes me.
Because I know we might have touched base on this a little bit on the last podcast when you were in the studio, which for the audience that doesn't know, we're obviously in a new studio today. It's a little bit different. Yeah. A little bit comfy, cozy. I might have to get these chairs and upgrade in my own studio. I had you guys sitting on some pretty crappy ones, but that's still early in the process last time.
Yeah, you know what, though? It's nice because these ones kind of make me feel sleepy, so...
Well, don't fall asleep behind the wheel of the truck, so just keep your eyes open for that.
Oh, no, definitely won't. If ever I get sleepy, I'll pull over. I'm the king of power naps. I'm going to take a power. Right now, I can sleep for about, 30 seconds, wake back up, feel refreshed. That's kind of like a secret. If you're ever feeling tired or foggy, take a little power nap, you feel all right.
Goodness. Where is your favorite place to have been when you drove truck?
Last podcast we did touch base on that. I really like Nashville, but I've been to some other places since then. But just as far, as driving goes, in regards to my career and like what I have to go through in a working standpoint, I really like North Carolina and South Carolina. Also, coming out of Pennsylvania, if you're going 81 south toward Florida, kind of got like you got the Blue Ridge Mountains, and you get to see the mountains, and it's an interesting terrain as you go west. When you start getting to like in Tennessee territory, it's pretty flat. There's not really too many mountains over there. But as far as places to actually spend time in and stuff, I touched base on Nashville. I really liked. Super cultural. People are nice. They have an emphasis on community and a higher standard of living. And so, I value those things. And they actually they have a museum there, Tennessee State Museum, which they built a few years ago. It cost like somewhere, I want to say $11 million. It could have been like $20 million or something. But just to point that out, you actually can go to that museum and it's free. Like, you go in there, it's free. And, and that kind of, tells you a little something about the state. Like, they want you to go do those things and to touch base on history and to learn about that stuff, because it's important to know where you come from. And from that standpoint, then you can kind of determine things like, okay, like this happened, so with that happening, like this is what happened. And if something else happened and it gravitated you into a positive direction, you'd kind of want to stick to that, opposed to something that wasn't so positive. And which is kind of interesting about, I always found interesting about Tennessee is Andrew Jackson. I don't know, some people might not be too familiar with him, but he was the president of the United States, and he was the president who enforced the Indian Removal Act, which like hundreds of thousands of Indians were killed because of it, just in order for them to, the United States of America to claim land. They kind of pushed them out by any means necessary. there's actually incentives to, the scalping. I don't know if they teach that in school anymore. It might be a little,
Grotesque.
yeah, it might be, people might be like, feel, people are sensitive about those things. But that's one of the, parts of history that I think is, necessary to learn because, we're pretty brutal. Like things we did were pretty brutal. And, I think the one thing that came about that was the Trail of Tears, where it was like middle of winter, and they kicked all these Indians out, and they made them march through the winter and stuff. And hundreds of Indians died. Like they were getting frostbite and stuff like that, and it was just like they didn't really care about it. And one of those incentives I was talking about is the scalping. They actually, the United States government paid people to scalp Indians, and when they would bring the scalp back, they would pay them so much money. And one of the higher prices would be if you scalped a tribe leader or something. And back in those days, say they gave them like $100 for a scalp, that'd be like equivalent to like, I don't know, like $10,000 today. So it was a significant amount. But yeah, if you want to talk about, that type of stuff, they have his statues and things like that. And, in the center of Nashville, they have, a statue of Andrew Jackson. And I always found that, kind of interesting. If you wanted to take down statues because of bad history, I don't know why they wouldn't take that one down.
Yeah, history is history is something that we look back on. It's just like life. We look back at the bad moments. We look back at the good moments where we progressed. Mm-hmm. And I'm not one to tear down, want the tearing down or removal of statues. Even that story that you said to me right then and there, which we learned about a little bit in history class. We learned that's Trail of Tears. I couldn't tell you who the president was that enacted it.
Yeah.
But the Trail of Tears, and I do believe, was that not down around like Florida, Georgia, where they made them start walking from to go west?
Go west.
Because I believe, didn't they take the Cherokee Indian tribes and because I believe they were more southern United States tribes that they made walk. But either way, it was still thousands of miles.
I want to say it could have been a Cherokee, but it was probably a combination of a couple of different types. But I know the Cherokee was definitely one of them.
Mm-hmm. No, but I mean, we've progressed so far since those moments.
Yeah.
And I love all these people too that because there's, and this is off topic then from Shield of Hope, obviously. We're talking about history and what I'm going to talk about a little bit here with the futuristic aspect. There's people that are like, oh, well, when the aliens come, we want to meet them. Well, if aliens are anything like humans, you know how we just, when we invade land, we take everything and kill things?
Yep.
Just out of human nature and the evilness of, our species at points in time.
Mm-hmm.
I would not want to meet aliens because I'm sure they'd be just like us.
Yeah, and it was even more. Me. I mean, and then the perspective of what you say is like we were kind of more. We had the upper hand to the Indians and things like that. Like we developed languages and we could write and we had a better understanding of business and stuff. And as you're saying, the aliens I would assume would be more evolved. Like they got spaceships or like they're doing these things that like we don't even know they're here, if they're here, or when they're here. And, the Pentagon and things have actually confirmed UFOs and things like that. Yeah. So whether you believe in Indians or not, these people in higher positions stuff have confirmed UFOs. So unless they're lying about this stuff, which who knows?
Freaky stuff in the year we learned in 2020.
Right? And they kind of just brushed it under the carpet, right? Like,
any other year that would have been a big story. But during the pandemic and everything else going on with chaos and election results and everything else, and that kind of got slid underneath the bus.
Yeah, it seems like, kind of strategic if you ask me.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I'll push back on when it comes to, I don't feel like we knew more than Native Americans when we came over because they taught us a lot of things on how to survive in the New World. I will say, though, that we just, as England and Ireland, whenever those, the Pilgrims and all the other, whatever you want to call them, the travelers from afar.
Like immigrants.
Yes. Maybe. When they came over, they had better weaponry.
Yeah. Exactly.
And that's what was able to force tribes out and natives to the land.
Yeah, exactly. And they, that prior to that, they had no realization of those types of things. You could imagine you have these super, athletic men who are it doesn't matter what they're going to do. And then they get shot and they're dead. And they're like, what the heck happened? They never experienced those things. So, and that was obviously an issue. And they, maybe I would like to believe that they didn't want to submit, but they had no choice. Mm-hmm. And then obviously we know what happened. They kind of got taken advantage of, and then they got pushed back, and here they are now on reservations.
Yeah. Well, so we had the pistols and the muskets back then compared to like bows, arrows, and spears. But so because that was back then. And of course, we've developed like helicopters and like military equipment and nuclear bombs and stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know there's still tribes in the Amazon rainforest that we can't get in contact with? Like they're still like uncivilized in our aspects of uncivilized. Yeah. What do you think they think when they see a helicopter fly over?
Oh, they probably think it's an alien or UFO and those things.
Do you think do you think they praise it like it's a god? Like how does that? I think it'd be an interesting concept that we could ever just talk to them and before they even know what it is, what they.
That would be cool. It definitely. I mean, I would think it would be similar to like if we'd seen a UFO. So what they think a helicopter is, we probably would think the similar things to UFOs, and that is a good point of how closed-minded people are, because some people truly believe that the world's civilized and everybody knows how to read and write and those things. There's tribes and stuff out there that are just as barbaric. They barely know how to speak. They don't know how to read or write. They live in remote locations, and they're living like we did hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we're just lucky and blessed to have even the internet. Oh, right? Yeah. There's countries that do not have the internet.
Yep.
There's small little islands that don't have the internet. That's hard for us to believe because we're so far deep into the internet. We got to count on almost every social media platform. We can talk to anybody. Heck, you can date somebody that's overseas. Technically, and find somebody from there. Stuff that we would never be able to do in hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. It's like, it's hard for us to grasp our head around it.
Yeah, and that comes with normalizing things, the social norms and those things. We're just so used to those things that it becomes. I guess you could say people take it for granted, and that's something that bothers me in ways that we live in an age that things like knowledge and information is so easily accessible. Think about before the internet, how did you learn about stuff? Like what did you do? You had to go to the library. Or you had to talk to somebody who knew about something. You had to, and even then you didn't really have cell phones. So how do you get in contact with people? How do you get the information? How do you even get the thought to, I wonder about this or I wonder about that. So it's an interesting concept. And, one of my favorite things, which it's not one of my favorite things, but when people say, oh, I don't know, it's like, go to Google, you can look up anything you want and you can find it out. So the saying "I don't know" is probably one of the worst excuses I've ever heard.
Yeah, but also too, when you go on, and you got to be very careful about even Google because it's based off revenue and who pays more to get their page bumped up. So anybody with false information, it can still be at the top of Google's list because Google, between paid and agendas, you got to be very careful about how you handle certain topics too. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of people get misinformed. They read something from like a New York Times, which don't get me wrong, the New York Times back in like the 70s, back in the 60s, and when it went up, and I believe it was up against the Missouri Times, the St. Louis Times, something like that. I remember my college professors are going to not be very happy because obviously being a journalism major, we learned about how it was, I believe it was a Missouri newspaper and a New York newspaper, how they actually like went back and forth and got us into like a certain war.
Okay.
And I can't recall which war it was. Yeah, so
I believe it.
Part of me. But at the same time, you don't know who to trust necessarily in source of information.
Yeah, and that goes back, how we talk about history. Like when people think that the media or certain aspects of our culture doesn't sway people, that's totally wrong. Like our media, take it back. We say media, but what was really you could say media, or you could almost say brainwashing.
Yeah.
We see the same things over and over and over. And it's not just on one outlet. They put it on all of these outlets. Before we got on the podcast, you talked about it. 95% of the media is all like monopolized to say the same stuff. And so if you're talking about what the definition of brainwashing would be to present something, maybe not in the same word, but like in the same way, and do it over and over and over for people to see it over and over and over. And as humans, we're receptive. So what we see, whether or not we think on it consciously, it's gonna, hit you. Your brain is gonna process that, and it's gonna be in your mind. And so unless you consciously think about it, it's going to be in your mind. It's going to be in the subconscious. And that's essentially what the brainwashing is like. And so if you want to say that doesn't exist, take it back to, prior to what, it used to be called. It used to be called propaganda. And then you go from propaganda to subliminal messaging. And subliminal messaging is one of those things where, you might find yourself in the grocery store, maybe you're out and about, and all of a sudden you just have the urge to buy something. And you probably had those moments, like, why did I think that?
Yeah.
Why did you think that? Had to come from somewhere, And I think that's where, you can call it propaganda, you call it subliminal message, you call it brainwashing. Today in this current time, I would call it integration, because they integrate it at a young age. As a child, as a baby, you're watching TV. I think TV and your phone and those things that's the integration. And then, back to what we were saying, how you live this lifestyle and you just get used to it, you normalize it, and you don't see anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
And that's the issue.
And I'm sure we've had brainwashing even growing up as kids in like our cartoons and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
Stuff that made us, and I won't call it brainwashing. I will call it manipulation before I will call it brainwashing, because you look at the ASPCA commercials, and the whole point is they're strategized on making it pull at your heartstrings.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's what they want.
Yeah.
And like, okay, but it's for a good cause. It's like animals, you want to rescue animals when you can. Get pets for people that actually can take care of pets and want pets. Mm. But when it comes to like the cartoons these days about the kids, it's like they're just slapping it in people's faces with it. It's not even like subtle. No. It's very like they'll hit you with it, and they'll continue to drive you into the ground with it until you believe it.
Yeah.
One thing, because this is a movie media podcast and channel, I always found it funny because I got into quite a conversation on YouTube or on Facebook last year, and it was because I was talking about the brainwashing and like the manipulation of the media with 95% compared to 5%.
Yeah.
And because I'm going to say right now, I'm a Democratic conservative. Okay. Mm-hmm. I believe more in democracy than republic, so I do not agree with Republicans in the essence of how the government is, but I'm also that conservative form where I would like to conserve our constitutional beliefs, conserve what we grew up with, and basically conserving about, this, because this country was founded with that religious belief.
Yeah.
So I would like to conserve that. But that doesn't change anything other than democracy, because I still want for the people, a government ran by the people, for the people.
Yes.
Basically with the people.
With the people, 100%.
So when I say that, it's funny because I can sit back here, I'm like, my friends that are truly conservatives and Republicans, they're getting hit hard on social media. Like they're getting slammed over here, and I'm getting slammed just being a Democratic conservative. It's like, okay, no, I love my Democratic beliefs. It's like, but that conservative side, I know you're hitting it hard. Mm-hmm. And I'm over here like, okay, so it's 95% to 5%. But I got in an argument on Facebook just simply because I made a reference to the Hunger Games. Mm-hmm. I was like, the news media right now, or the people that are like, okay, well, we're very left-leaning and we feel oppressed. I was like, you guys have 95%. You guys are like the capital in the Hunger Games. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The conservatives right now that are trying to fight is like Katniss Everdeen going up, against this. And they're like, that's not true. I was like, every celebrity, and like not every celebrity, obviously there's celebrities that have spoken out against liberalism and this other concept of left-leaning ideologies. Yeah. But I was like, almost every celebrity, and they get canceled if they're not, but if every celebrity, every news station, every outlet, basically, sports even now, has gone completely left-leaning, that everybody's kind of forced to believe it.
Yeah.
And you guys still don't think you're majority? Like, there's something wrong with this. If you can't grasp and say that your belief is being pushed to the highest extent. And that's where I made the reference, and they're like, no, that's not true. And I'm over here like, I can't help you then.
Yeah, they don't want to admit that reality. And that goes, we were saying before, they just want to take, total, I feel like they want to take total, it's never good enough unless they can have like total domination. And I think that's a flaw in humanity, as we've seen that time and time again. It's like, look at Julius Caesar. He's like conquering and dividing to the point where he's like, no, I'm just going to take over the whole world. And that's what I feel like these people are trying to do.
Because this is going to be a leeway or a lead-in conversation. So why does our generation follow celebrities or like kind of go with like the peer pressure, or like why do we look up to celebrities or like big media?
I mean, I would personally say it's, the most popular thing. Like, I wouldn't say it's the most popular thing, but as growing up as a child or young adult with like middle school, high school, they're considered public figures now. And so I think what most people want is they want to be a part of something. So if there's a celebrity and they're doing things that people like, and they start to gain followers, and people start to talk about them, then it kind of becomes like a tribe mentality. And that's kind of where if you look at ancient history, we're really just a bunch of tribes. Everybody's just a bunch of tribes. You can call it tribes, groups, cults, whatever you want to call it, organizations. And we all want to be a part of something. So I think when you get these groups of people that are a part of something, everybody kind of hops on the bandwagon. Oh, I want to be a part of this. Is the cool thing. I want to be a part of that. And back to how we live our lives, just becomes normal. Nobody sees anything wrong with it. And who doesn't like when you look from a man's point or a young man's point of perspective, when you see somebody like Megan Fox or something, like she's a beautiful woman, you're like, oh wow, like I like talking about this woman. Like you can look at her, you can smile, and you say she looks good. And from a woman's point of view, a lot of women like Trey Songz or like Michael or Jordan B. Michael, I think that's his name. And they're good looking people, and people are attracted to those things. They're attracted to good looking things. Like for instance, when they did a study with homeless people versus attractive people, like attractive people were like 90% of attractive people were helped opposed to homeless people. Like nobody wanted to help the homeless people. And but anyway, that's kind of like our culture and our society. And I would say back to your question, is like those are just the norms of our culture. I don't really know how we got there, but that's where we are today. And I think that we need more diversity. Like people need more diversity, not to look at public figures and look at movie stars, and to kind of value people that are actually, I'd say, more of an essence of how our society functions. And those types of people are just everyday people. Farmers, truck drivers, nurses, doctors, like even, people that don't have those, like necessarily those like high titles, even, the clerks and the people that work at the grocery stores. Without all these people, you don't have a functioning society. Even, with my job right now, I deliver voting machines to Northeast PA, and we deal with hundreds of people that all form, this structure that, puts together these, the structures for people to go out and be able to vote. And without these people, we can't even go out and vote and to, have this society that we want, this democracy essentially. And like there are a lot of these people are just volunteers. They don't get no money, but they do it in good faith for humanity, knowing that if they do these things, then our humanity can progress into better things. And I think that that's what people should value, and our media should, not put emphasis on, these actors and these rappers and stuff. And I have a lot of not good things to say about a lot of these people, specifically like Cardi B. So I don't know. There's nothing me and you could really do. Like you could be like, yeah, Cardi B's not that good. Try to say that to like most people. They're like, dude, you're crazy. And I was just listening. Well, I didn't want to listen to it, but it came up on the. I had a friend over and she had the song on and stuff. And this is the first time I ever watched the music video.
Is it the WAP song?
Yeah, I think it was the WAP song. It was the WAP song or something else. Anyway, all of her music's the same to me. It's all like, degrading to the female embodiment. Like, and it's very disrespectful if you ask me. And it's just, the content is just, it's just absurd. You're just like pretty much degrading yourself in a song, and then you have all these people that follow the figure, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this is great. Like, what's great about it? I don't understand." It's just cool, I guess. I get it. Like, you can bop your head to it, you can dance to it and stuff like that. But outside of that, there's really the value of the song it's very counterproductive. It has no value.
No, I completely understand. Now, I didn't go as far as to watch the music video. I've heard the song.
Yeah, don't watch it. It's not worth it. It'll be a waste of like 4 minutes of your life.
We'll come back to, because I do have something to say on that, but I want to go a little bit more in depth on this. So just tell me a celebrity that you look up to. Just name 2 of them right off the top of your head.
So I like Will Smith. Will Smith's always been one of my favorite growing up. I watched Shark Tales in elementary school. Still watch Shark Tales. If I'm ever having a bad day, Shark Tales is my go-to. And then, it's tough to really say. I have a bunch, but I like Bruce Willis. Bruce Willis is good. Robin Williams is good, just kind of people that have tried to spread positivity and those things. Those are the ones I look up to. Yeah. Now,
obviously, Robin Williams is no longer with us, and that's a tragedy in itself.
Yeah.
I put his death as like Paul Walker's death too. Like two of the people I grew up loving in the film industry. But where I'm getting at a little bit is like, so with Will Smith, Bruce Willis, they're on social media.
Yeah.
Okay, whenever they post something, you don't agree with them 100% of the time, do you?
No, never.
Okay.
Well, no, I shouldn't say never, but yes.
Yeah. But why is it that, like, you can make a distinction? You can like somebody, but we can always disagree. We'll be fine with disagreeing.
Yeah.
But our generation, like, takes whatever, like, Ariana Grande or someone like Cardi B. They say that as gospel, basically, to them. Yeah, they can't disagree with them. Mm-hmm. How do you fix that? Because that's a problem in itself. If you're going to just listen to somebody's opinion and, like, let's be honest, they don't really use facts in what they preach, most of them. No. But, yeah, it's mostly their opinion.
Yeah.
But, like, why do all the younger generation or our generation, why do they always follow that opinion word for word? Because then they're hypocrites, because then somebody comes out and they say complete opposite of what they tweeted before. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, oh, well, that's always been her stance. Yeah. And that's my stance. I'm over here like, it just wasn't like 2 minutes ago. Right. So, but how do you get in somebody's head? Like, okay, you can think for yourself. Because in a day and age when Cardi B and all these other, and we'll go more female, but when you got, because they're pushing feminism with, like, female independence, which is fine. Yeah. I think everybody should be independent. Mm-hmm. But they're preaching independence to a tribe of their own that follows them at every word, that doesn't think for themselves. So how independent are they?
Not independent at all. They think they're independent, but they live in they're living in a false reality. And I definitely I'm not gonna put like the female the artist out there right now, because they're they're killing the game right now. They're doing good. They got a lot of followers, and let them have their time. Let them push that feminism. And I think looking back on history, we haven't given women or females, they couldn't even vote to like the 70s or something like that. So, maybe they're just kind of, turning around and, really feeling good about the power that they're having now. But, back to, independent thinking and things. And, I think that's kind of the social norm, and the culture is, they live in this, false reality where they feel like, they're thinking independently, but they're not. And I don't really know how you would fix that. I think that kids are lazy. They're getting lazier. And that's kind of with technology. Technology makes things a lot easier. And when things get easier, then you start to fall into this cycle of like, oh, I don't have to do this and I don't have to do that. And that's kind of with that evolution. Think about where we started like 100 or 200 years ago. Like, people were working like 16 hours, 18 hours, and we've evolved into like work unions and like, back to laws and structures. I think a lot of these things are good. Like, nobody should have to work 16 hours a day, like, for their entire lives. I don't even believe anybody should really work over, 50, 60 hours a week. Now, granted, if push comes to shove, you might have to work a little bit longer, but I don't think like you should have to, work 50, 60 hours for your entire lifetime. people should be allowed to go on vacations and experience life. And, the structures that we have, I think, enable people to not have to think for themselves. They can easily just brainlessly go on social media, look at, whoever they're following or whoever they look up to, and just hop on whatever their opinion is. And they don't got to form their own opinion. It's much easier that way, because then they're not wrong. If that person's wrong, they're not wrong. It's like, oh, well, she said that, not me. So then it's like a pride thing. I think they don't nobody ever likes when their pride gets hit. If your pride gets hit, it's, that never really feels good. So if you never have to be, have that personalization where, oh, that was me, life's, once again, it's easy. It's the easy way out.
The only reason why I ever push back, and this is more so about 5 minutes ago when you talked about how you don't like to push them too hard, the artists, because they're putting out good songs, they can preach about feminism or whatever they want to do.
Yeah.
Which you're absolutely right. They can do whatever they want to do. Like I said, on true democracy, you'll have to run the way you want to run.
Yeah.
My problem is progression. You talk about people not working, or, people that shouldn't be working 16-hour days to, survive, maybe even over 50 hours a week,
Yeah.
But it's progression. You get more efficiency when it comes to workplace, or even women weren't able to vote in the 40s or 50s, and when they got their rights to vote, or same thing minorities, whenever they got the rights to vote, or whenever they slavery, whenever you broke free from slavery.
Yeah.
The problem is it's a progression. So it's a slow progression towards the inevitable goal, which is just freedoms.
Yeah.
You can't force that on people, though. There's a difference between doing something like Martin Luther King, where he came out here and I had a dream, by the content and not the color of our skins, the content of our character. But that's not forcing anything on it. Living a good life and showing you're a good person, is different than shoving it down somebody's throat and saying, no, you need to accept me because I'm this, And we always have the saying in the film industry, especially in my group for filmmaking, is forced diversity is not true diversity.
Yeah, 100%.
So it doesn't matter if it's female. It doesn't matter if it's an actual a minority, a race. You can't go into an idea with a movie and try to force that down people's throat, or cast basically around just because you have to have minorities. Because that in essence for us is more racism in itself, when you have to have a quota.
Yeah.
And colleges do this all the time, which is just absolutely insane, because that's racist in itself, that you're only bringing people on because they're minorities, and that shouldn't happen.
No.
So when we tell stories here at Show of Hope, we're telling stories based off the volunteers we have, who fits the perfect role for this, what's their abilities, whether it's on screen. Obviously looks come into it, because look at that chiseled face over there.
Yeah, people tell me, I've gotten, a lot of things like, oh yeah, you look like you should be a movie star and things, and it's always it's not a forced thing either. I'm not walking up to these people and yeah, I think I should be a movie star. They're like, no, we think you should be a movie star. And that goes back to what you're saying, things.
But you got to tell the story based off the actual intention for the story and the characters in the story, making a good story, and escapism. Because think about it this way: movies were always meant to be movies, books, everything else. When it's not a history book, it's meant to get you to escape reality that you're living in. There's always stuff that tells you a little bit about our reality in a book, or when somebody writes something. Heck, every film I've done, there's always been a little bit of reality. Whether it's my personal reality or reality of the world around us. Yeah. There's always been that little bit of it in my writings. Yeah. But the whole point is to get people to escape for 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. Doesn't matter how long the film is. It's meant to escape.
Yeah, I think that's the essence of why, I've said this before, is why I value the movies that you produce, is because they always have reality, aspect of it that touches base on reality. And, that's important. And back to the escape, you can escape out from your reality into a different reality, but that's the thing. It's still reality. It's not just some fantasy land. And I think, these people that we're talking, they're in this fantasy land. That's not real. Those things aren't actually real. They don't exist. And another thing that you're saying too is you do very well at revolving your stories around the people in your cast, and you don't force that on those people. And that's how you create these genuine movies, because when these people are acting, it's they're not they're acting, but they're actually talking from a point that they believe in that. So it's not really acting. You know, you are able, you know, you can pull that out of people, and you know, kind of moving forward into like something that we're doing. You know, I won't spoil it, but the movie about sex trafficking, and that's kind of touches base on me how you say about how you revolve your movies around your cast. And you know, when I was in truck driving school, that was a big part of our, what we were learning in our curriculum. We had somebody come in, and he taught us like about like how sex trafficking is a big part of trucking, and they actually have a union, Truckers Against Sex Trafficking, and it's kind of changed in the years with technology because you got cameras and those things. But early on, before you had cameras and video and stuff like that, like truckers were like the main sex traffickers. You know, they trap from coast to coast. You're on the coast, and you got like a cargo container, and you got like all these people in there or whatever. And just send them off or whatever. It's I think like a $1.5 billion industry. And you were saying earlier, like wherever there's money, if there's money to be made, it don't matter if people, like some people will disagree with it, but how big is the check? Like how much money do you have to make for you to kind of look past that?
And some people will. It's truly amazing. But like I'm sure one of the basic things was, and it's like anything with like bomb squads. The NYPD does like this thing, or it used to run commercials that was, if you see something, say something, like on the subways.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's like that for the
it's the same thing. They have the same exact saying. But they obviously want you to be safe, and they don't want you to either harm yourself or harm other people, because you gotta imagine the type of people that are involved in this stuff. They're like savages. You're literally sex trafficking human beings. Like you just don't have a
they don't have that moral compass, so they'll kill you on sight if they need to protect themselves.
100%. If they're willing to kill somebody else, then why wouldn't they kill you? And and then at the end of the day too, you're dealing with people that if something were to happen, for say like they lost it, I'm gonna call it a shipment. Like if they lost a shipment, and we're talking about human beings here, they're probably going to get murdered. And not only they're going to get murdered, but probably their families, the people they love and they care about. And you got to look at the backstory too. Maybe they didn't want to do this. Maybe they got, roped into it. Maybe somebody said, hey, I got this good job for you. It's, you're not really doing too much, but, you can make a lot of money. And you're like, okay. And if you're talking to somebody who doesn't have much, you're going to be like, oh yeah, this sounds really good. And then you get into it, and you're like, wow, this is not what I thought it was going to be. And at that point, it's too late.
It's like gangs or anything, whether it's like city gangs, they rope you into it. They rope a lot of younger kids into it. Or whether it's like the drug traffickers, I'm blanking
like
on
the cartels
of the world.
Yeah.
I just went to go see the movie the other day, The Marksman with Liam Neeson.
Okay, yeah.
Helping that immigrant get across the border to Chicago.
Yeah, I might watch
that
today.
the cartel actually chases them and stuff like that. It's pretty neat. Kind of follows the same line as Logan. Did you ever watch Logan, the Wolverine one?
I think I
Hugh Jackman's final Wolverine.
That's like solely based on like his life story, right? Wolverine.
It's the end of his life story, basically.
Okay, wait, that's where he's gets sick and he saves the girl, like the Spanish girl and stuff. Yeah, that's a good one.
So it's kind of like that. It's very similar. And then what was the other one? Did you ever watch The Mule?
Yeah, I think I've seen that one.
Okay, so that's with, I'm blanking on names also, and Clint Eastwood.
All of his movies are, if he's in a movie, it's probably going to be.
So when you're talking about, and this will reference your character basically in the film we're getting ready to shoot here eventually.
Yeah.
It's more so his character, because you're like, oh, well, maybe you got a good job for you. You were just saying about that and how people get roped into it. Well, he was just like, he needed money. And he wanted to pay for like his family and then his daughter to grow up, and so he accepted this job. And they said, "Don't look in the back of the truck, just take it." And it's like, okay. And then he's like, "Oh, I got all this cash when he made the delivery." And then he looks in the back of the truck and realizes what it is, and now he's stuck in it.
Now he's stuck. You can't get out. And
which your character in the film does not take it, that advice that you were talking about earlier either, about like, oh well, just say something, but you don't want to get too involved in it. Like you want to just tell the authorities or whatever. But your character in this film does not do that. He takes it into his own hands.
Yeah.
Which you probably should have listened to the rules of your Truckers Against Human Trafficking. But well, what kind of film would it be if you didn't have hands on it?
No, you gotta have the conflict. And
you gotta have action.
You gotta have the action stuff.
Have blood stains and gunshots and. No, so we're going really far back to our action roots here at Shield of Hope with this film.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And, I've had, even prior to the movie, which is crazy, I've had, dreams and just, daydreaming. When we had this stuff, I'm, daydreaming about, what if this actually happened to me? What if I was
out on camera?
If it was real life. Now, well, thank God it's on camera. It's not real because, as much, as fun as it sounds, or I don't even know, as intense or, as rewarding as it might be if that situation happened and I was able to save a bunch of people, could you imagine how you would actually feel in the process? You could die at any moment. You got all these people that you're trying to save, and not only that, but cartels and things have a way of finding you. You've probably heard so if you're gonna pretty much mess up millions of dollars. Who knows? One day when you're just walking down the street or something, and they find you, and you've seen movies and stuff like that, and it's pretty brutal. That's reality. So these people that live in fantasy and stuff, and nothing can ever happen to me. Believe me, if there's enough money involved, anything can happen. Anything can happen. We've seen it, with history and stuff.
There's an end credit scene I have for this film too that we're doing, but I've yet to determine if I want to do it.
Oh yeah, that's right. You were talking about the alternative endings and those things.
So I mean, this will just be something that plays out to the credits, which might anger a lot of people, but I think it's more of it's true what I would put an end credit scene, because again, you don't know who's has positions when it comes to a cartel. Yeah. Because in the movie, when you watch The Marksman, there's a scene where a cop pulls the guy over, and you're just over here is a cop a good guy? Even though he's in a police officer uniform, is he a bad guy? Because a lot of these, you don't know how deep into the system some of this stuff goes.
Oh yeah, infiltrated. We've have history. I don't know, one off the top of my head, Watergate, something like that. The never think that the government and those things aren't infiltrated in these types of things. Once again, if it's making a lot of money, you can't really trust anybody. And not to get into politics, but more recently you have certain emails that I reference the Hunter Biden emails, or the Hillary Clinton emails and stuff like that. They have been now known that they have certain things that regard sex trafficking, stuff like that. So these people are pretty high up there. They're part of the government. They're leaders of the world and stuff like that. So why is there even any speculation that they are involved in something like that? And I'll just leave it at that, because it's all hearsay, you could say. But my personal opinion, if if it's making enough money, certain people are going to be involved in it. And I've always said, back to the mobs and things like that. How did the mobs were making all this money, right? They were kind of involved in all this legal stuff, and then the federal government came in and they wiped them all out. And I'm well, the mobs and things were involved in making all this money, and then the federal government came and wiped them out. They were able to, they initiated the RICO Act and stuff like that. So it was if one person was found to be doing these things, and if that person was linked with anybody else, then they could all go to jail for the same charge, pretty much. Yeah. And but so they were able to find ways to get these people off the streets and eliminate them, essentially. And so they were able to do that. But then you're talking about a $1.5 billion industry where it's somewhere between 500,000 to 1 million kids are sex trafficked every single year. And yet that just kind of happens. That just kind of happens. So it makes you think who's involved in this to continue to let this stuff happen. And when I was in school and we're learning about the sex trafficking and stuff, it's it's just been going on. It's just been going on forever, ever and ever and ever. But when the mob comes in, it gets eliminated. It was big for a little bit, and then they just eliminated it. And the federal government came in and did that. So where's the federal government when it comes to the sex trafficking? And that's my point. Who's involved in this stuff? Could it be the federal government being involved in this stuff? I don't know. But it raises questions. You got reality and you got fantasy. This is the reality of the situation. And as we know, politically and those things, politicians aren't really known to be the best types of people. So that's just the reality of the situation.
Until lately.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden they're great.
Yeah, no, they're super great.
But I do think one of the, because all this stuff adds up to, because you're like, well, why don't we hear about this? Mm-hmm. It's like, because there's no movies about it being made.
Yeah.
And that comes back to, if anybody wants to push an agenda on the opposite side, whether it's conservative or Republicans, they should be doing what the Daily Wire has been doing, which they just put out that Run, Hide, Fight film. I don't know if you ever watched that.
No, I haven't.
So it's about a school shooter. Okay. And it's about, it's basically the father teaches the daughter how to hunt early in the film, so she knows how to use a firearm. Okay. But so when there's school shooters going on, she's actually in the building. She can either run, hide, or fight back.
Oh, okay.
So it's really, if you want to talk about feminism, even it's a really empowering thing about okay, she knows how to use a firearm. She's going to go take down the shooters and the bullies and and stuff like that. So it's a cool concept. But those are more films that we need. So when it comes down to the sex trafficking, whether it's the film that we're doing to raise awareness for it, whether it's a short film or whether, we need more of that from the Hollywood industry.
100%. Yeah.
Because that's why we're not hearing about it.
Yeah, I think Hollywood, has their own agenda. Wherever this money's coming from, they're probably receiving money from whoever to, talk about certain things and do certain things. I mean, Hollywood is in its own world. They kind of just do what they want. And, I think back to what you're saying about how they're, you don't really see it is because it's maybe not making back the money. Is it going to make, they're just selling you what's going to make the most amount of money pretty much. And, whoever maybe is in charge of these things doesn't want to raise awareness on sex trafficking and those things. Because once again, who knows who's involved in this types of stuff. Why haven't we had a movie on something like that? I like, the guy from Taken, Liam
Neeson.
Yeah, when he, that was really one of the first movies that I ever seen that raised awareness on sex trafficking. Mm-hmm. And of course it's a movie. He goes out there and beats everybody up, travels across, he's ex-operative and all this stuff. But once again, you escape reality and you start to get that adrenaline rush. Oh, maybe that's never was gonna happen.
The joke with him though is you get your daughter abducted once, it's tragic.
Yeah, it happens again.
It happens again. You're a bad parent.
Right. That is true.
Then you get your wife abducted and killed. It's you're just a bad person in general. Come on now, Liam.
Yeah, you need to, you gotta teach them the signs. You gotta make them aware of all right, if this happens, you gotta get out of there. But hey, back to what I was saying too is you do stuff to these people and they're not gonna forget about it. They're not gonna forget about it. Yeah. They're gonna come back at you and they're known to be they're not gonna come after you. They're gonna come after everybody you love, anybody you've ever come into contact with. And there's movies on that where they portray those types of things happening. I forget what the one movie that I watched, but they were it doesn't matter. It could be anybody. They wanted the guy to live alone. They didn't want him to have any friends ever again. And so he talked. Somebody said hi to him, and then later that day, they sent up his head in the mail or something. So, but that's once again reality versus fantasy. That actually happens.
Yeah,
stuff like that. Bob, it's not going to be on the news. This guy just got a head in the mail.
We live in a crazy world. We live in a bad world.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's some good things in life. So, what I do want to end on today is what is something positive or motivational that has happened in your life recently?
Recently, I mean, positive things happen every day, all the time. I think that you just have to be perceptive to those things. Even things that you might perceive as not good things, you can turn around and turn them into good things. But I'm trying to think of a specific example or a specific experience. It's funny that you asked that because life currently has not been, too positive for me. Recently it's been tough. But I guess, right there in itself is, so life's been pretty tough and I've had a lot of hard times recently and things that, I didn't want to happen, how I wanted to happen, it didn't happen. And, with that, turning it into a positive, it's, helped me to become a better person in certain ways, to grow in certain ways. And I'd say, my patience has definitely been tested, a lot recently. So I was able to grow in that way. And, in my faith, kind of leaving things up to God and, giving those things to him and realizing that, I can't do this on my own. I need God. I need people to help me. And sometimes, I get stuck into that kind of like that loophole of like, I got this. And that's kind of how, I was born and raised, is I had to do a lot of things on my own. So I get stuck in that mentality. It's like, I don't need anybody's help. Like, I don't need you. I don't need anybody. I'm just going to do this. And then, so to turn that into positive, it kind of taught me again, like, I got to put my faith in other people and I got to trust them. And, that's helped me to, grow in that way. And, a lot of other things. I'm drawing a blank on those other things because that, it's hard to think about it. You're like, this was really bad. And what
that's also, think about it this way. It's hard to say the positives.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it really is.
Because you're just so used to, like, when life is, everything's going right, it's just like, okay, not bad. But then the bad things just like consume you a little bit.
Yeah.
But life is kind of like treading water. Okay, when you're out in the middle of the ocean, life is every day of your life, you're treading water. But every second above the water is always a good day.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. And it's one of those things where you're only drowning as long as you keep your head under the water.
Yeah.
So as you pop your head out of the water, you're no longer drowning. And that just, in reference to bring that back to reality is, you can choose to suffer. If you want to suffer and you can choose pain, that's a personal choice. Like, if you're having a hard time, think about your thoughts. If you're thinking like, oh, this stinks, like this is terrible, all you got to do is change your mentality. You don't have to suffer anymore. You can change your suffering and you turn it into positives. And, that's a good reference because I think a lot of people choose to hold their head under the water. Just pop your head out of there and start breathing. There's air above the water, believe me.
It's about learning to swim or drowning. So, I mean.
Yeah. I'm not the best at swimmer, but I can keep my head above the water.
I always wanted to say, Fear Factor, when it was like truly like when Joe Rogan was like hosting Fear Factor.
Oh my God. It was like
I always wondered if I could do some of those.
I knew I couldn't. I would never do it.
Some of them looked fun. And then other ones like, listen, bugs,
no.
I'd be okay with.
Oh, you'd be okay with those?
I would do, that'd be
No
fun
way.
with me. I could do bugs, snakes, whatever. Cockroaches would be a little bit iffy because that's just, listen, being from, I didn't grow up in Georgia, but I always used to go visit my uncle down in Georgia. Mm-hmm. And the water bugs, the cockroaches there, there's just so many. They're huge.
Oh, it's different over there.
And it's just like, we killed about like 30-something one night down there.
Cockroaches?
Yeah, we were counting. Well, the water bugs, but the cockroaches at the same time.
Altogether,
so it was like, those give me a little bit of nightmarish scenarios. But I was like, you know what? I could do that. But what always amazed me was, because we're talking about water, is when they did those water things where you had to dive down through the circles. Like, do you remember the stages of Fear Factor? If you got to the final, like, they'd have like maybe like a whole pool, but like down in the deep end would be like, you had to bring them up to the surface and be like a relay race. Okay. But you had to like find the opening. So it'd be like a hole here, hole there, and then like the thing. So you go down, like swim like an obstacle course to get back up. Okay. I was like, that would always terrify me. I wouldn't know where the holes were.
Oh yeah, because you're kind of under the water. Yeah. See, I forgot about that. I'm not too familiar. So you're like what? So you're like under the water, but it's dark.
Well, you start on the land. The whole point is you got to retrieve what's on the bottom of like the pool area.
Okay.
And they have different like picture. How like when you have you ever watch movies where like people are like on the ice? It's like a frozen lake.
Yeah.
And they're on the ice and they fall through the ice, but they can't get up anywhere else but through the hole. Yeah. Well, they would put the holes like in certain areas, and you'd have to dive down and go down through the holes. But my problem would be come back up. You want
to be able, disoriented. You couldn't find the hole, and you start to panic.
Now, obviously, Fear Factor is different because they're not going to let you drown.
Yeah,
you have a safety crew down there.
Maybe somebody drowned, you just don't know about it.
We cut the camera.
Yeah, they cut the camera.
Cut up so it didn't get aired.
It's possible.
Well, thank you, Will, for joining me on this podcast. You guys can find us up on YouTube, Spotify, Rumble, and we're on Apple Podcasts as well as many other platforms coming up. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Will.
Awesome. Thank you, Donnie. It was a pleasure talking as always.